Do you need to pass GED Social Studies? In this video, I'm going to go over some GED Social Studies practice test questions that should be very similar to the types of questions you'll get on your test. I'm going to go through some proven strategies as we go along to help you get more questions right on the test. The chart describes the 4 methods used to amend the U.S. Constitution. Which statement correctly describes an important way that the process of amending the U.S. Constitution is different from the process of creating federal laws? A. Only one government branch is involved in the amendment process. B. Only one legislative body can conclude the amendment process. Or C. Only state legislatures are involved in the amendment process. Or D. Only state governments can start the amendment process. So you can go ahead, pause the video, try to figure this out. So to get this question right, you have to know a little bit about the process behind how a federal law is created. In the US, there are 3 branches of government. The legislative branch consists of the Congress and has 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The executive branch consists of the president. There's also a judicial branch, but it's not that important here. The process starts with somebody getting an idea for a law. They then contact their senator or representative. The senators and representatives then vote on the bill, and if it passes in both the Senate and the House, it goes to the president. The president can either approve the bill or reject it, which is called a veto. If the president vetoes the bill, it then goes back to Congress, and if it's overwritten, it then becomes a law. So what you're supposed to see here is if you look at the 4 methods of amending the U.S. Constitution, in step 1 and step 2 for each method, these are all just talking about the legislative branch. They're not mentioning any other branches, whereas we already said in creating a federal law, it involves both the legislative branch and the executive branch. So that's why A is the correct answer. Only one government branch is involved in the amendment process. So here's the answer, the question overview, and the answer rationale says the legislative branch is it's hard to say. The legislative branch is the only government branch mentioned on the chart. Of the 3 branches of the U.S. government, only the legislative is involved in the amendment process. Question 2. This excerpt is from an article published in the Washington Times in 1908. The senator said, "The reasons for this reform are thoroughly well understood. It will prevent the corruption of the legislatures. It will prevent men buying a seat in the Senate, and make the Senate more responsive to the will of the people. It will also make candidates campaign before the people." Which concern about the original method of selecting senators is implied in this excerpt? It failed to limit the influence of the wealthy. It did not help to organize debates effectively. It neglected to limit the influence of the majority, or it did not encourage an efficient lawmaking process. So if you'd like to, you could pause the video now, try to figure this question out. So whenever you get a question where multiple answers seem like they could be right, pick the answer choice that seems like it's most right. One awesome strategy is what I call the power words method. The trick is to pay attention to words in the passage that are related to words in the answer choices. So I want you to note that connection between the word buying in the passage and the word wealthy down here in the answer choices. So if we look at that connection here, that helps cue us into the fact that the correct answer is A. It failed to limit the influence of the wealthy. So let's see what happens. So if I submit that, that is the correct answer. And here's the answer rationale. It says, from the direct statement in the article that the 17th Amendment will prevent men buying a seat in the Senate, we can reason that, unlike the original method of electing senators, the amended version will limit the influence of the wealthy, parentheses, those capable of buying a seat. Question 3. The 17th Amendment. In 1787, delegates to the Constitutional Convention decided to give state legislatures the power to select U.S. senators. The purpose was to ensure that the interests of the states were represented in the national legislature. However, some argued that the people should directly elect their senators. They thought the interests of the state would be preserved because the people were the source of all government power. The first of nearly 300 congressional resolutions calling for direct election of senators came in 1826. Over the next 85 years, an amendment to directly elect U.S. senators was debated extensively. Finally, in 1913, the 17th Amendment, which allowed for the direct election of senators, was ratified. And then the question reads, what does the word convention mean in both the chart and the 17th Amendment passage? A cultural tradition, formal assembly, agreed upon contract, or preferred writing style? So you know the drill. Pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. How you handle the time pressure on your test can make or break your score. So one awesome tip is to first read the question and then look at the answer choices before you read the full passage, because you may not always need to read the full passage, and this is going to save you time. To beat questions that are asking you about the meaning of a word, use what I call the substitution method. The way it works is that you first find the word in the passage that they're asking you about. Then take each answer choice and substitute that answer choice in for that word and see if it would make sense that way. So let's find the word convention in the passage. So we see it right here. In 1787, delegates to the Constitutional Convention decided to give blah blah blah. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each answer choice and we're going to substitute that word or phrase in for the word convention, and we're going to ask if it makes sense. So it says, in 1787, delegates to the constitutional cultural tradition decided to give state legislatures. So ask, does that make sense? Well, a cultural tradition, it's a thing, right? It's not a person. So when it says delegates to the Constitutional Convention decided, it's talking about making a decision here. So a cultural tradition is a thing, it's not a person, and it's not a group of people. So A would be out here. So what about formal assembly? In 1787, delegates to the Constitutional Formal Assembly decided to give state legislatures. Okay, so what is a formal assembly? Well, an assembly is just a group of people. So a formal assembly, it's just a formal gathering of a group of people. That's basically how you could think about it. So that actually is going to fit here. So B is the correct answer. So it just says here that the term formal assemblies best fits the meaning of the word convention as used in the chart and the passage. On your test, whenever you find an answer choice that looks like it's right, it's always a good idea to still review the other answer choices quickly and see if you can eliminate them. That way it confirms that your original choice is correct. Now, of course, if you find yourself really pressed for time, then just skip this altogether and pick the first answer choice that you think is right. Question 4. Women's voting rights. Since the 19th century, many people have worked for equal rights for women. Much of this effort focused on suffrage, which is the right to vote. One of the greatest victories for advocates of women's rights was ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920. The 19th Amendment stated that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. However, the struggle for equality in other areas of society continued even after the 19th Amendment granted women suffrage. What do the passage and graph indicate about the United States in the 20th and 21st centuries? So the answer choices are right here. Social movements halted inequality within society. The changes in voting rights impacted representation in the U.S. government. Democratic principles are more powerful than cultural traditions. Or the Civil War amendments created greater democratic opportunities for women. And so you see the women's voting rights graph here. So go ahead and pause the video and try to figure this out. Let's look at A. It says social movements halted inequalities within society. So if you picked A, then good try. But the word halted should tell us that it's not right. It says here, the struggle for equality in other areas of society continued. So we know from the passage that A is incorrect. So let's skip down here to D. It says the Civil War amendments created greater democratic opportunities for women. So the word Civil War should raise an eyebrow here. And the reason is because the Civil War is not even directly mentioned here in this passage. We have to go based off of the evidence in the passage. And so we can rule out D based off of the evidence. So what about C? So B, we can clearly see it from the data in the graph, and C here, we can't clearly see that from the data in the graph. And so the answer rationale just says the passage of the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote, and that, as the graph indicates, this change in voting rights led to a large increase in the number of women representatives in the U.S. Congress. Okay, social studies question 5. Select the appropriate session of Congress to fill in the blank in the sentence below. The number of women representatives who served in the blank Congress was twice the number of women representatives who served in the 101st Congress. So go ahead, you can see the choices 90th, 110th, 106th, or 65th. So pause the video now and try to figure this out, and we'll go over it. Okay, let's go over this. So we want to first check the number of women representatives who served in the 101st Congress, and then we're going to look for twice that number, and then we're going to see which session of Congress that was. So I'm zooming in here so we can see this, and so we want to first look at the 101st Congress. So right here we see sessions of Congress, and this 100 tells us that right here is the 100th session. So we want to go to 101, which would be this line here. And if we just trace straight up, we see that that's about pretty close to 30. So that looks like it's 29, but let's just consider it 30. So we're going to double that. So what is 30 times 2? Well, that's about 60. So we want to look at when there were about 60 women representatives, which would be this dot right here. So remember, it wasn't actually 30, it was 29. So we would expect to find the dot that's a little bit below 60. So that would be right here. And so now if we trace this down, we see that that would correspond to the 106th session of Congress, because right here is 105. So this little slash here would be 106th. So let's see if that's the right answer. It just says the graph shows that the number of women serving in the 106th Congress was 58, double the 29 serving in the 101st Congress session. These test taking strategies will really help you out with GED social studies, but the key is to keep practicing them and to keep working hard, and you'll get there one day. And also make sure that you're subscribed for the next video I do in this social studies series. Thanks for watching, good luck, let me know down below how you like this video and how you do on your test.